web accessibility, because Shadi, you always usually talk about this topic. Then Masahito is from Keio University, the use of video remote interpretation during COVID-19. And finally, a wonderful wrap-up from Christopher Lee from G3ICT, which will be Digital Accessibility Rights Evaluation Index presentation.
Okay.
Then we will have a question and answers, and Andrea, you most likely will be doing your closing remarks.
As per usual. Anyway, welcome everybody. So we have 27 participants, and we have a chat box, which we have a wonderful remote moderator who is Judith Hellerstein. Judith, put your face up for 2 seconds so we can see you.
Well, actually, you could see my virtual face, a static photo.
Oh, I see. All right. That'll have to do. Okay. So when we come to the question and answer period, Judith is in charge of the chat box, and she will take your questions there instead of everybody jumping in. We decided so that we had more time for people to speak and make sure that they had sufficient time, that we would use the time after everybody has given their presentation to have questions and answers. And if you can put them in the chat box or do a raise hand, then Judith will tell us who's next and what's in the chat box versus the questions. Is that okay, Judith?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to introduce.
Are we putting, Andrea, are we putting questions and answer in the question and answer pod or the chat?
Chat's better, I think. Don't you think so?
Well, the question and answer pod, right, Andy, that is correct. For some reason, the IGF turns off the question and answer. Our virtual host, can you turn on the raise hand feature? Because
that's Gabrielle and Megan.
Yes, could you turn on the raise hand feature because it's apparently it's off?
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you, Gabrielle, and thank you, Megan, who's ever doing
yes,
it.
And you can put your either questions in the Q and see this Q&A pod. Everyone can see the questions, and they can also rate the questions by. So there's a feature in the Q&A thing, a little checkbox, the hand, where if you think a question is really good, you could click the hand and it moves up higher on the list, so that the questions that have that people think are the best ones get raised up higher. And so if you could put your question in the Q&A pod, that would be better.
That's fine, and I think that would be good to use that afterwards because it covers up the whole screen. But
well, you can put the Q&A pod and then you can close the Q&A pod so you won't see it, but it won't disappear.
Correct. I was going to say, while we're having the presentations, if anybody wants to make a comment that everybody can see, and we now have 32, put them in the chat box. That would probably be the best thing to do, is to put it in the chat box.
All right, comments in the chat, but questions in the Q&A.
Right, but if somebody happens to put a question in the chat box, can you make sure you double check that, Judith?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Judith is very competent on all this. Well, anyway, I would like to introduce people, and I would like to have them flash themselves on the screen in no particular order. I'm Andrea Sachs. I've been doing accessibility for a very long time and with IGF since 2008. And I'm chairing this meeting with a lot of wonderful people I've known throughout the years. And we have Lydia Best, who is the chairman of the National Association of Deaf in Person, and also is the JCA Joint Coordination Activity on Accessibility and Human Factors at the ITU. And we also have Shadi Abuzara, who is basically a web expert and is also for W3C, who has worked with us over the years, and we'll be talking about web accessibility. They'll give you their titles when they come. Then we have Masahito Kawamori, and Masahito is from Keio University. He's a professor there. He also is the rapporteur for question 28, the health question, and question 26, the accessibility question in the International Telecommunications Union. And he's going to be talking about VRI, video remote interpretation, which is basically sign language. He will go into detail about how we do that at a distance, which is particularly interesting during COVID. Then we have Fernando Buffalo. I hope I said that right. And he is leads the F123 initiative, and that provides high performance software and training and technical support for people with disabilities. And he will explain. He is basically helping blind and visually impaired people. And then we have Christopher Lee, who is the, do we call you a president or a chairman of IAAP?
It's managing director.
Oh my God, I got it wrong. That's normal.
That's all right.
Managing director of IAAP, and also an associate of, an IAP stands for the Global Initiative of Inclusive ICTs, and he's also associated with G3 ICT, which is, I never can remember what G3 ICT stands for, but there we go. And who have I left out? Have I got everybody, Lydia? Shadi? Anyway, we're going to start the proceedings in this manner. Each person will give a presentation. They will have to do their own slides if they have them, and hopefully keep to a minimum. You have 10 minutes, and I've got a timer, but try to stay within 10 minutes. And then afterwards, we will have question and answers for everyone. And Judith will, in fact, probably run that pretty well. She'll give the questions out, and we will recognize. If you know who you want to ask the question to, please specify. Otherwise, we will let the panel choose which question they would like to answer by just saying so. So the first, are there any questions, by the way, that anybody has on how we run this, or any suggestions that might make it easier for you? Okay, right. The first speaker is Lydia Best, who will, her title is, Lydia, can you see?
Yep.
Go ahead, the floor is yours. Give the title of your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you very much for everybody who has joined our workshop to listen to our discussion and suggestions on the way forward, especially related to the pandemic we are still in, unfortunately. So I'd like to bring in the topic of people who have a hearing loss or deaf or hard of hearing, and how they have been affected and are still affected by the pandemic. Just to bring you some idea of numbers, for the UK, which I am from, is about 11 million of people of the 64 million of population have some sort of hearing loss, from mild to profound. So it's not everybody is going to interact with the services the same way. But for the worldwide, just to give you an idea, it's altogether about approximately 65 years, over 65 years old of age. Maybe 1/3 of them are already having major problems with hearing loss, disabling hearing loss. Now, one of the main aspects of hearing loss is individuals' ability to communicate with others to different degree, different extent, depending on person's hearing loss again. Now, majority, including myself, prefer face-to-face communications, but because we can lip read. Lip reading has been in news anyway. I'm sure many of you have noticed already the situation with masks, and it's before the panic struck. This is how many people have just gone by going to visit the doctors, visiting services and so on, just by making sure they have a face-to-face appointments. However, pandemic struck, And everything, the rules of engagements have completely changed. Everything is now online, everything is now remotely. So the options of going and have a face-to-face meeting is no longer really possible, unless you are digitally aware and skilled to manage, for example, with the actual webinars as ours. Apologies. So what I would like to say is all the different services have suddenly been set up either online on the websites, or the telephone numbers have been given out to everyone. Please call this number and we will be able to support you. Health services as well have changed, and suddenly all the telephone calls have been made, not only for appointments, but also for actual telephone consultation with a doctor, which is very stressful. Many people were not able to access it because for using the telephone itself, it's without lip reading and contextual cues. It's not possible sometimes to conduct such important conversation with a doctor. So what we have also as another context to the situation is Office of National Statistics in March 2019 has issued an interesting report in which it shows that adults over the age of 65 years are consistently making up the largest proportion of non-internet users. And what we do mean by non-internet users, they are those who do not use internet at all or haven't used it for the last 3 months. So hard of hearing people hearing loss, deaf, who don't use sign language as well, they have been thrown suddenly out of a comfort zone to use services or different ways of communicating, which they were never accustomed to. This, of course, have thrown some challenges to the charities like National Association of Deaf People. And we have tried to come up with training online to try to encourage them to use it. And while some people have actually got on the platforms, got on the digital services, there are still some who didn't. And there are also some who, for many different reasons, just cannot do it. Therefore, it is very important that when we look at services provision in general, we need to look at how people interact with the internet, how people interact with all the different services, and provide the range of ways of contacting. For example, between our association, there were some of the members saying, we have managed to get our doctor to give us an email access so we can make appointments via emails. Normally, the doctors and the local practices do not do that. They prefer that you actually call them or maybe use the online service. Not everybody is able to do this. And if a person is not able to do this, how are we going to be able to contact? Therefore, independent and updated guidance for the professional is very important, but we need to understand how people might choose to interact with them. But word choice is so important for the people with hearing loss because they interact in a specific way with other people. For example, if someone is a decision maker at the service provision, local or national government, we need to look at different range of ways of being able to contact it, be it via SMS. Please don't, for example, set up an SMS service which provides only the message from you, but it does not give me opportunity to respond back with the SMS text message, because it's not going to work as well. Don't ask someone immediately to make a call. There is also a way of going beyond just the immediate solutions which I am showing and presenting right now, but there is also a longer term solution which we need to look at. And we will not stop, most likely, using the telephones and organizing different services via telephones. And therefore, we need to improve the telephone relay services, including in UK, especially, which would provide the range of ways of being able to contact services. But that needs to be both. It has to be, for example, text relay service, which we have to limited extent in UK, be it video relay service for the people who use sign language, which they need to use as well in their own language. And lastly, caption telephones, which is the service which is much easier for many older people to use than, for example, going online. We do require for everyone to think beyond the simple, easy solution. Think about filling in all these cracks which are happening everywhere, and hopefully this will make sure that nobody falls behind in our planning. So my plea to all decision makers, all planners, think about what else you could do to ensure that everybody can be included. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. And I think it's extremely important that the deaf community, hard of hearing community, is being left out in the planning that governments are doing. And we'll take questions for Lydia when we get to the end of all the speakers. Thank you very much. The next speaker is going to be Fernando Buffalo, who actually runs the, whoops, am I there? I don't have to be there. Oh, there we go. Gotcha. There you are. You're actually on camera now, Fernando. If you would like to explain what you do and carry on, and what title did you give regarding your, we were trying to get people to give us titles. So what title would you like to give your particular presentation?
Well, the title I was using was meant to be provocative. It was failure is always an option. Of course, failure is not an option as far as our priorities and our needs are concerned as persons with disabilities. However, I wanted to highlight the fact that failure is not an option only when there is preparation and conscious effort to make sure that things work out as they should. So I apologize if this was a little annoying for some people, but I thought it's important. I think COVID-19 reminds us that whatever cause is not pursued with systematicity, with discipline, with cooperation, it rarely is achieved. Let me just bring up a couple of facts. I think, first of all, I don't have slides for you today. I want to have more of a bit of a conversation. The situation of COVID-19 has highlighted the tremendous deficiencies in the accessibility of distance learning infrastructure and content. So if before we had challenges when people were attempting to take certain courses and even university level distance learning, now we realize that when it comes to elementary school and high school, the challenge is even greater. And it's not just education, although education is incredibly important. You have other very strategic, very important services like unemployment forms online, stimulus checks, and other forms of government assistance have not been accessible in many cases. And we've had people facing extraordinary challenges, not just the stress level and the difficulties that everyone has, but in addition to that, the ones that are specific to each disability. I would like to look at this not so much as what's happening now, as important as it is. We need to use these opportunities, I think, to look at accessibility more strategically. Historically, we have faced cycles. If you look at using blindness as an example, which is the area where I am most familiar with, we've had, when mainframes and mini computers were the most, the prevalent technology in the 1960s, 1970s, they were, for the most part, inaccessible to the blind. When they became accessible through the use of microcomputers themselves were only partially accessible, personal computers, in the 1980s. When those were becoming more mainstream, and more usable by the blind, then we had the emergence of graphical user interfaces like Windows, which make them inaccessible again. So you have a cycle. Again, we had a few years of very bad accessibility. When we finally got a more equal, a more leveled field in terms of accessibility, we once again lost it when everybody started focusing on the web. When that started getting better, we had the emergence of interactive pages, AJAX, Web 2.0. When that, and then we had that, almost at the same time, more or less, we had the emergence of smartphones as a new platform, again, having difficulties, particularly with Android, with the Android platform. So we have these cycles coming again and again and again, and we are never ready for persons with disabilities. We're just about never ready. And we need to have more of a structure, a more strategic approach to this so that we don't have years of falling behind. As we have seen with COVID-19, digital technology today is no longer a luxury or a convenience, it's an absolute necessity. A lot of the services that are being offered online, they are not complementing what you might get in the physical realm, like a library. They are replacing them. So what can we do? By the way, Andrea, I had planned to set up my timer here and I forgot to turn it on. So please let me know when I'm running out of time. So what approaches might allow us to avoid this constant cycle of accessibility and inaccessibility, which leaves us behind for so long? For example, Facebook was launched in 2004. They only had an accessibility team in 2011. And that doesn't mean that it became immediately accessible. There are issues to this day, but it was a gradual process. So in internet time, to have 7, 8, 9, 10 years of delay is absolutely unacceptable. So what might be an approach to avoid these cycles? I think that what we can do is obviously improve education. Education of the technical people that are behind, but also policymakers that need to better understand the issues of not just accessibility, but of the digital world, the consequences of different policies like copyright, like digital rights management, like, in other words, copy protection, and implications for the objectives we all have of having a democratic society, having a free speech, and all that. I think policymakers are not as well prepared as they should be in terms of how well they understand the technology. So education all around. Then we have regulation and we have delegation. Regulation is what a lot of governments are realizing, is that the internet has become incredibly important, and they are looking at large influential companies online as in need for better regulation. It doesn't mean that we are going to block or cause problems for innovation, but there are day-to-day activities that today take place online, and they need to be, the rules need to be better understood, better enforced, better designed for this new era. And then there's delegation. I think there is enough complexity in the technology and its interaction with the day-to-day activities of all of us, those with and those without disabilities, that we cannot have a situation where any single government agency, any single private corporation, or for that matter, any single association of individuals, civil society entity, really makes all the decisions. We need to have And in this, we have an excellent model in the way internet standards were developed and continue to be developed. A modern way of cooperating where you're including not just the technical experts, but you're including people who understand about disability, who understand about social issues, about free speech, about the limitations on this or that other right when it affects the country or the society as a whole. And we cannot have an effective design of technologies if we don't have a very good balance between all of these interests and all of these needs. So that was a little fast for me, but for you, maybe not so much. Do I have a few more minutes or should we move on to the next?
I think probably if you would like to wrap it up in one, we will be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So just a small correction. I am no longer leading F123. F123 was an organization that was a for-profit company, and when I registered for IGF, that was accurate. Now I have closed F123, and I will be working with the disability team in UNICEF in New York. So I will continue to work with disability and technology, but now in a different position. I hope it's okay that this time around I am neither representing the private sector nor international organizations. I'm in between one and the other.
I think that's wonderful, Fernando. Congratulations on your new future, and I know that you'll impact them tremendously. I think they need you in New York.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your talk, and what we'll do is we'll have questions for you at the end, as we will for everyone. So I do want to, I'm not showing myself because everybody can hear me just fine. Oh, except that some people might like to lip read me, so I'm sorry, I'll put myself back on. What I'd like you to do is to close your video, Fernando, and the next person to speak is Masahito Kawamori, who is a professor at Keio University, and he will be talking about youth. Hi there.
Andrea, I think Shadi will go first before me. I think Shadi was planned before.
You are absolutely correct. I did a dyslexic. Thank you, Masahito. Forgive me, Shadi. He is absolutely right. I'm looking at my notes and I've made a boob. Excuse me. Okay, Shadi Abuzara, would you like to put your video up, please, and show us who you are? We'll be talking about web accessibility. Shadi, I don't actually know. You do everything in W3C. So perhaps you'd like to take the floor and explain what it is you do and how this impacts COVID-19. Thank you, Shadi. Take the floor.
Thank you, Andrea. And yeah, congratulations, Fernando. Great news. So yeah, I want to actually tie on and continue where Fernando left off. Maybe to say, unfortunately, failure has been an option for too long. To continue the thought that I think Fernando had started. So I work for the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, which is an international standards body that develops core standards for the web. So it was launched in 1994 by Tim Berners-Lee, who is the inventor of the World Wide Web, and has been developing technologies such as HTML and many more, and we've heard about that. And the web continues to evolve to become really the primary source of information, of digital interaction. It's kind of like the interface to the internet in a way. Mobile apps are using web technologies very often. Web services, we see now softwares that are fully web-based and where you don't even know the difference between when the desktop is and when the web. So all this is in a way good because it gives us really many opportunities that were unprecedented before. There's really a huge opportunity for people with disabilities in having an accessible web. However, unfortunately, the web is far from accessible, and many studies show that. We are making progress, but we are far behind many targets that governments have set themselves, that, you know, that we've all pledged. We're far behind the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, right? So we're behind on promises, and a collective understanding, a commitment to human rights, and for too many years. The Web Accessibility Initiative exists since 1999. The latest version, WCAG 2.0, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is recognized as the international standard for web accessibility, is used in the US, in Europe, and in many countries around the world. Exists since 2008. So we've had so much time, and things have not been progressing to the need. And now with the COVID, we see it even more. We see how suddenly everything has moved online, where people before have been saying, you know, it's not a priority yet, let's do it later, or we'll fix that later. It's not so important. Well, you can call us, or you can come by if you can't access it online or something. And now that's not an option anymore. Everything has moved online. Healthcare, information about life and death. I'll be so dramatic and put it that way. I mean, it's really information about emergency situations, emergency about what you need to do to be safe, that is very often not accessible to people with different kinds of disabilities. We've heard about people who are deaf and hard of hearing. We've heard about people who are blind, but there are many, many more different types of disabilities. People with low vision, people with cognitive and learning disabilities, people with physical and mobility impairments. So we really have a broad spectrum of accessibility, and the accessibility standards address these. Yes, they're constantly evolving. We're constantly improving these accessibility standards as technology evolves, but there's a lot that we could have done already. And now people with disabilities are being even more excluded, because now in the time of pressure, we hear very often, well, we're so busy, we need to get this website up, we need to get this online MOOC or something, an online course up in time, and we don't have really the time or the resources to focus on accessibility now. So again, there is this delay, there is this exclusion where we are seeing things. I saw the school of my nieces myself that suddenly went online, and I had a look at their online learning platform, for example, and it's far from anything near accessible. So again, what I'm trying to say is we've had so many opportunities, and we keep putting it away, and we keep delaying this. And now, at a time of crisis, when it should be most needed and most apparent that it's essential, it's being delayed again, because there isn't time, there isn't resources. We'll do it later, we'll fix it later. These kinds of things are continuing to exclude people with disabilities. Now, on the upside, let's propose some solutions, because not only throwing problems down the road. Fernando mentioned a few that I completely concur with. I think education is one of the most important things. We still have people involved in IT, and I mean throughout, be it the managers, be it the designers, the developers, the QA testers, all these people, all those who are involved in IT, implementation, development, research, even content authoring, do not learn about accessibility. I mean, it's just like architects graduating and not knowing anything about accessibility. This is exactly why we have so many buildings that are inaccessible. The same happens in IT. We have all these people involved in IT that are year for year learning the wrong things. And then we try to run behind that freight train and retrain them and tell them, no. The way you learn to do something is wrong. Here's the correct way to do it. And to try to retrain them, and to try to and we're constantly kind of running behind that train rather than to get ahead of it and to try to have accessibility built into the courses, the mainstream education, how IT is taught from the beginning, that there is this accessibility awareness. But I think an even bigger point is the lack of participation of people with disabilities, and Fernando mentioned that. But it's a really big issue. I am a technologist. I focus on accessibility. I focus on standardization. But one of the most important things throughout is the involvement of people with disabilities throughout, be it in the design of products and services, be it in the standardization, be it in the policy development, all the areas that Fernando mentioned and others have talked about. All this, we need people with disabilities at the table. And this is also part of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Nothing about us without us, famous slogan of the disability movement. And that's really essential. That's really important. I mean, nobody would imagine the women's movement or the gender equality without women involved, right? But we do have lots of discussions on accessibility, lots of designs without the direct involvement of people with disabilities. And that creates, I think, a whole slew of problems, because people try, they have good attempts, good intentions, but they don't understand the users, they don't understand the direct participants. So I think I'll leave it at that to focus on two key points, really: the education, including accessibility throughout education, in particular in IT, to make sure that people are aware of accessibility and know how to address it, and there are these capacities. I mean, much of accessibility is not rocket science. Much of accessibility is feasible, and standards and technologies and solutions exist already. It just needs to be implemented. And the second, which is maybe even more important, is the involvement of people with disabilities throughout. Andrea, back to you again.
Thank you, Shadi. I couldn't disagree with you on anything you've said. Thank you very much. Nothing about us without us. Do you know that was the deaf community that created that particular motion, because it was the deaf community that screamed and yelled for the American Disabilities Act so long ago. And they were the beginning of the change that made it possible for those of us with disabilities. Oh, incidentally, I now get to join. I have to wear hearing aids, but I can't find them. So yell, everyone. Anyhow, I would like to move on to the next person. And as I say, we will be doing, for those of you who've just joined it, we will be doing questions at the end. So the next person we have is Masahito Kawamori, who you saw briefly, from Keio University, who is a professor there and also the rapporteur for question 26 and 28. And his subject is the use of video remote interpretation. Masahito, can you put yourself on? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Andrea. Can I share my slides?
Yes, you can. Go right ahead.
Okay. Okay, there you go. So my topic here is about the use of video remote interpretation during COVID-19. And as you may know, I would add to what Shadi and Fernando touched upon, and I would concentrate more on solutions or the concrete examples of actually providing accessibility. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the practice of physical distancing or social distancing makes it difficult for a sign language interpreter to physically present with a deaf and hard of hearing person whenever they go to an office or government or hospital. So it is now almost imperative and essential that remote sign language interpretation, or what we call video remote interpretation, VRI, be implemented. Many meetings, including medical consultation, has gone online, just as Shadi mentioned. Many schools and classes are online now. So persons with disabilities, especially deaf and hard of hearing people, cannot fully participate without VRI. So in short, lack of VRI will lead to discrimination against persons with disabilities. And this is against the UNCRPD, just as Shadi also mentioned. And VRI is not just for deaf and hard of hearing people. VRI can also be used for visually impaired person when they want to check small things, just very small things, but are very important for them. So how does VRI actually work? This is an example that's actually implemented in Japan. So on the right-hand side, you can see a hearing person, say a doctor, and then in between, there's a smartphone, which shows a sign language interpreter. And also on the left-hand side, you see a deaf or hard of hearing person who can be a patient visiting a doctor or talking to a teacher, or parent talking to a teacher. So this smartphone can provide a VRI service with a remote sign language interpreter somewhere far away. And for an actual implementation at ITU, International Telecommunication Union, we have published a technical paper on web VRI, which is a guideline on how to implement a safe and secure VRI system using standards. It is expected to support telemedicine, online education, and emergency and disaster resilience, and others as well. And it's based on WebRTC standards of W3C and IETF. W3C is the organization that Shadi has just introduced and mentioned. It is the body that standardizes web standards. So WebRTC standard can provide a web-based VRI with end-to-end encryption and secure communication channel, which is suitable for protecting persons with disabilities when they communicate their very important personal information over the web. And also VRI or WebRTC can provide an easy to implement community-friendly VRI because it can be web-based, so many people find it easy to implement. So as my conclusions, I would like to say that if implemented widely, globally, VRI, especially web VRI, will enhance communication, not only for deaf and hard of hearing people, but also for visually impaired people, and more so even. And VRI, along with good ICT infrastructure, should be part of the immediate plan of every nation, because this is very important, not only for a small number of countries, but also, I mean, it's all important for every nation. And more importantly, just as Fernando and Shadi have emphasized, the failure to do so, on the other hand, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, since it's a question of death or life or death, so will result in the discrimination against those persons with disabilities involved. So that's my my conclusion. I'd like to send a message that this is a very important part of accessibility and also part of UNCRPD. Thank you, that's all. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Masahito. I'm very grateful for you to, oh, there you are. I can see you. We have you now in full. Thank you very much. Definitely appreciate the fact that you have explained about VRI so that the rest of the world can actually know that this exists, because that is so important to communicate with directly with persons with disabilities and to let them be involved. The next person, I'm just going to keep moving because we can have an open discussion when everybody speaks. I have been taking note of the chat box. I will, Judith is going to read some of the important issues in there. And I've told people in the chat box, if you want to have your comment read out, we can arrange for that also at the end. So now we have Christopher Lee, who is from G3ICT. Are you? There you are. There you are. Christopher Lee works for well, actually is, I always have to ask you, right, you're the president. Is that right? Correct?
No, managing director.
I never can remember that.
You can call me whatever. It's fine.
I can call you whatever. Well, the beauty of this workshop is that I know everybody and I can make mistakes and nobody is going to beat me up. So why don't I let you identify yourself correctly and you just go right into your presentation. Thank you.
Sounds good. Well, it's excellent to be here today with this panel. Quite impressive names on this panel, so I really appreciate being included. I am Christopher Lee. I'm with G3ICT, which was mentioned at the very beginning. We started a nonprofit organization back in 2006 to support the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. G3ICT focuses really on just policy development. There's 4 key areas. Focus on institutional advocacy. We have events. One of them is M-Enabling. Every year we have it in DC, except for this year. It was all virtual, but it's in June usually. And then we also focus on education and certification, which is what some of the speakers have already talked about today, the importance of education, specifically in universities. And I think Shadi brought that up, as well as Fernando. So there's a lot of crossover of what I'm gonna be talking about. The core of this presentation is really focusing from a holistic standpoint of, we've got a lot going on around the globe in regards to accessibility. Some of it's going well, some of it's not going so well. But how do we track that? How do we get kind of a pulse on what's happening regarding digital accessibility, as well as the built environment? So what I'm going to be talking about is the DAIL Index, and this is a service, a product, I guess you could say, from G3ICT. G3ICT is the umbrella. I'm managing director of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. It's a vision of G3ICT. And we focus on the core area that I think Shadi just mentioned, is that education piece and that certification piece. People with disabilities and people not with that disabilities needing to know more about accessibility from digital as well as the built environment. And IWP is focused on the accessibility profession as a whole globally. So that gives you kind of an idea of who we are and what we're about. So I'm just going to go through some slides here. And the first slide is really just encapsulates what has already been said. There's nothing new on this slide that our speakers haven't addressed already. We know that due to COVID-19, that digital services need to be accessible, and the issues have come around ensuring that they are accessible. They have grown, very quickly and expanded to the need of people getting access not only to education but in the workplace. This all wraps around websites, mobile apps, televisions, documents, and the DAIL Index I just talked about, which I'll dive into just a second. Addresses some of that. We try to monitor what's going on out there around the globe. The next bullet point, just for accessibility reasons, I'll be kind of going through each bullet point. We know that it affects a wide range of disabilities. It was mentioned already. It's not just individuals who are blind or hearing impaired. It's cognitive disabilities and so on. So we've got to make sure that we include all people with disabilities into the work that we do. We know that, as has been said, while solution standards exist regarding digital barriers, there's still implementation around the world that needs to be done regarding these standards and guidelines, and I'll get into that in just a second. And then impacts regarding COVID-19 related to services, it crosses the board. It's all sector, it's all industry. There's not one that's left out. So I think that's important to keep in mind, that when we do think about digital accessibility, it's important that we not only bring people with disabilities into the mix of it, but we also bring the sectors and the industries and make sure that they are engaged, whether it's the financial industry or the health industry, retail or tourism. It all is wrapped around, and that's a challenging aspect of digital accessibility, because there's so many different needs. So the survey is the DAIL Index. It's the Digital Accessibility Rights Evaluation Index, making up the DAIL Index, the acronym. We just released, I think, our third version of it, full version of it. It represents 137 different countries, which obviously makes up 90% of the world population. The concept of the DAIL Index was going to advocacy groups, going to panels led by organizations with people with disabilities to get their voice, to ensure that they are telling us, being G3ICT, through this index, how the country is actually doing in regards to digital accessibility. How would you rate your country? What are the standards and guidelines are in place? Are they being implemented? So that's the concept of the DAIL Index. So it's really evaluating the country in itself. So to give you a snapshot, and there's a lot of data here. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is a grid. And on this grid, it focuses specifically on specific areas of the DAIL Index, one of them being TVs, webs, and e-governance in smart cities. And on this grid, just to kind of explain it, for people can't see it, there's no policy, either the country has no policy, no implementation, the minimal, partial, or sustainable, and full, meaning the percentages go across that way. And with TV, no policy, I'm just going to snapshot a couple of these, at 39%, at web, no policy, 42%. In regards to e-government and smart cities, you're looking at 50%. So if you go all the way across the grid regarding countries that are fully addressing policy, you only have 1% in TV and 1% in web and 0% in e-governments and smart cities. And I will say on the side note that G3ICT has a division that focuses just on smart cities and digital accessibility. So this kind of gives us a snapshot of where we're standing right now in regards to accessibility on TV, web, and e-governance based on advocacy groups feeding back to us. The next slide is focused on legislation supporting digital accessibility. We've heard already from the panelists how important this is. There is legislation out there. Is it being implemented? So this grid actually talks about general law protecting the rights of persons with disabilities being one category, reasonable accommodations being the second category, and then legal definition of accessibility includes ICT. And it's broken out to two columns, percentage of countries with laws, regulations, and policies from 2018 to 2020. So what is the difference that we have seen? And just to give you an idea regarding general law protection, in 2018, we were at 83%. Now, based on the DAIL Index and the data that we're getting back, we're at 89%. Regarding reasonable accommodations defined, which is obviously incredibly important, at 64% in 2018 and 68%. So we've seen a little bit of that 4% increase in 2 years. And then legal definition of accessibility includes ICT. We were at 49% in 2018, and we jumped in 2020 to 59% based on the feedback that we've got from those 137 countries that came back to us regarding the data they supplied. So again, we're seeing some movement, which is exciting. A lot to be done, obviously, based on the last slide and this slide, but there has been some positive movement in the last 2 years regarding the data that we are collecting. Now, regarding the next slide is regarding the opportunities. That's just closing the gaps in capacity of implementation. So again, it's focusing on the implementation piece. You can have a standard, you have guidelines, but if you don't implement them, you have laws, but if you don't implement them, it doesn't do much good for individuals with disabilities, obviously. So this grid just has, countries who are in the process or resources in place. So countries with processes or resources in place is the key area of this. And there's different areas in the sense of process involving people with disabilities in policy making. We've already heard about this, the importance of this. We're at 26% of that in regards to countries in the process or resources in place. The next category is ICT accessibility courses. So this goes back to, I guess, universities, colleges, as well as maybe internal organizations that have courses, whether it's a MOOC or whether it's you know, a full-blown course, like IBM has courses that for their individuals. Microsoft has courses regarding accessibility within their internal organization. So right now we're looking at 38%. So ICT accessibility courses available in major universities or offered by professional educational services around the country. So it's a combination of both, and that 38%. The next category is government agencies and focus points on accessibility, ICT, we're at 39%. And then references to international accessibility standards, we're at 44% based on the DAIL Index. So that kind of gives you a snapshot of what we're seeing with the DAIL Index. I want to show you something in just a second, but this is my last slide. So this is, you know, priorities to build on accessibility. So we talked about solutions. Shadi mentioned, you know, there's a lot of issues out there that we've got, but what about some of the solutions? And they've already been kind of brought up already. But you know, we've got to make sure that the momentum in ICT accessibility supporting legislation continues to be positive, the trend there, and we need to continue to advocate that. That's one of G3 ICT's primary goals out of 4 is to advocate for supporting legislation. You know, we've got to make sure that digital accessibility solutions exist. They must be made available to build an exclusive, accessible, and sustainable digital world. So we know that. And then some key areas that we focus on, obviously including people with disabilities. We've said it several times, adopting accessibility standards, getting countries to adopt these standards and really promoting them and making sure they know how to do that from an implementation standpoint. And then what I work a lot on with G3ST is definitely what we talked about is training and certification, and showing if they're not getting it in these universities, the individuals that they're needing to learn about digital accessibility as well as the built environment from an architectural standpoint and so on, that they are getting it someplace. So certifying people with accessibility is critical, and that's what IWP does. So that gives you a little bit of the DAIL Index. So, you know, what I'm showing right now is a screenshot or the website actually of G3 ICT and the country profiles. And really the DAIL Index, one of the things I didn't really say up front is that the goal is that it kind of uses a competition standard in a sense. It rates different countries on how they're doing. So I can put this in the chat, this particular website, but if you drill down to the website, it's in different languages. We've got it in the French and Spanish and English right now, but you can actually see the different regions throughout the globe. And what you're looking at right now is the flags of these different countries. And you can drill down to each one of the 137 countries that reported through the DAIL Index and look how they're you know, addressing accessibility. And I think it's an important way to see how things are kind of shifting with the country where they were 2 years ago versus where they're at now. So the bandwidth right now is pretty slow. It's kind of here we go. So I'm drilling down right now on South Africa and where they're at right now. And I'm not gonna spend much time because my time is pretty much up, but you can get a really good idea of where your country's at in specific areas, you know, regarding, you know, key country facts, country laws and regulations, the total DAIL Index score. You can actually look at that and where it stands in the specific areas that we're pulling information from, regarding the countries. So with that being said, that gives you an idea of what we're doing at G3 ICT in regards to trying to track all these different issues that we're dealing with accessibility in the digital age right now. So I'll turn it back over to you, Andre.
Okay, got the mic on. Thank you very, very much, Christopher. What I'd like to do, because all of you have touched on extremely important, I have to start my video. Okay, I'm getting instructions. What I'd like to do is get a picture of everybody who was a presenter, please, on the screen, so people can see you when they ask a question. I think it's important. I don't have to be there. I'll have my voice in a minute. Thank you. We've got Lydia, we've got Christopher, we got Shadi. Where's Masahito? Masahito, where are you? There you are. Have we got everybody? Right. Okay. Now, Judith has been in charge of the chat box, and I think some questions have come in there. There was one question in this special box, but that's difficult to manage because it covers up the screen. But can you hear me, Judith? Can you hear me?
Sure. Yeah, so
Do you have
Mrs.
any, wait a second, let me just give you a brief and how I think it might be good to do it. There is Judith. She's in charge of the questions. Now, if anybody has a question, she's going to read it out. If you put it in the chat box, then she'll read it out. And then if you want to select a specific person to answer it, you can by looking at the screen and saying, okay, I'd like such and such to answer that. Okay, can we put all the other speakers back up, please, Louis?
Yes, so we did have one question in the Q&A pod that Shadi answered, but I just wanted to also read it out. Mataj was asking about templates and guidelines of how to teach and educate students and programmers, and Shadi answered it, and he gave a link to the page on the Web Accessibility Initiative page, Worldwide WC3 page, and they're developing curricula for designers, developers, authors, and others involved in web projects. So
can we ask Shadi to elaborate, please, on that question?
Sure, Shadi.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned very briefly, we are developing curricula, open curricula. We're seeing around the world different types of courses and training, and with very different quality. Some of them are really good. Some of them are not so good. We also very often have requests by, for example, university professors who say, you know, I teach computer science to students and I'd love to teach about accessibility, but I'm not an expert myself. If you can give me materials, I can include accessibility in my courses. And so for that, we're developing curricula, which are very modular, and you can combine them to fit different kinds of training and different kinds of courses. And so I provided the link. I'll read it out loud. It's w3.org/WAI/curricula. Thank you.
We will have a report later, and we will put that web page in the report for you, Shadi, so that people can access you and your information. In fact, everybody will be available, will be allowed to be in. If you don't object, all the speakers can be in the report with their email addresses so people can ask direct questions.
Andrea, we have another question.
Go
From
ahead.
Axel LeBlanc. He asked, can AI be a game changer for digital accessibility, such as for screen reading features?
Well, I think that one should go to Fernando.
Yes, I think AI can definitely help. It's very hard to say right now how far it will go in the short term. I mean, everybody says that, you know, we'll basically have totally smart machines eventually, but it's hard to tell how far it's going to go. We have seen, for example, self-driving cars. They have been taking longer than expected to come around. And in the context of what we use, web pages and online digital documents and so forth, AI depends a lot on context. So if you have pieces of you know, if you have images and that can be anything from you know, a photograph of a galaxy to a photograph of a dog, it becomes more difficult than it would be for a car, for example, because the car is always going to be expecting street images. So I think, yes, I think it will be much more influential and much more helpful initially in specific contexts. So for example, I hope we have some AI to read as graphs. Now graphs, it's a limited universe of possibilities, or at least much more limited than, you know, anything. And I think it's an area where you could have AI helping us make things more accessible. So I think that's going to be a much more promising area, to have specific areas of interest where you have a limited universe of possibilities, and then AI could definitely help us out.
I saw Shadi raise his hand. I know he wants to say something, and then afterwards I'm going to ask Masahito Kawamori, who is in standards. Please, Shadi, you first.
Yeah, this is such a provocative question. Thank you, Axel, that I really have to respond to that. Yes, my personal view, I think all technologies, the more technologies we have, people with disabilities rely on technologies. My wheelchair uses carbon fibers that is used in, I don't know, cycling, professional cycling and professional racing, because every gram that I save will save my shoulders. So, and with AI, again, we have, amazing opportunities to do lots of things. But at the same time, again, like with any technology, and I'll sound like a broken record, without the involvement of people with disabilities, we also run a lot of risks. AI bias is one of the things that is very, very worrisome, where, we've seen all sorts of things like AI-based employment systems that will actually add to exclusion rather than support inclusion, because they amplify bias that is already existent in the society. We've seen simulated cars, thankfully only a simulation, that would run over wheelchair users moving backwards because the self-driving car did not recognize that situation, that scenario, because there isn't enough data about people with disabilities. So again, like with all technologies, it's a two-edged sword. And coming back to the point, nothing about us without us. It needs the involvement of people with disabilities to make sure that we can get the benefits of AI, and that we don't have technologies that are inaccessible that we have to chase behind and try to make, retrofit and make accessible again.
I agree completely.
I think I'm going to put over the question over to Masahito Kawamori, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with both Fernando and Shadi. It's important that I think AI will become definitely a game changer, as Axel asked, especially in the area of perception. Because right now, I think many of the perception areas, I think AI has already surpassed some of the human capacity faculty already. But it's still not perfect. It's not 100% accurate. So that means, because humans do err, it's also the same with AI. So I think it's going to be, we have to have sort of a good management, as well as Shadi said, the involvement of persons with disabilities, and probably the practical ways, sort of a hybrid, human and AI, so the human can be assisted by an AI technology, as well as AI can be helped by human beings. That's actually what happened with machine translation a few years ago. I mean, like many years ago. And that's what's happening actually with, for example, captioning telephones in the United States, or captioning itself, right now we're seeing it. It's not 100% automated, but it's helped by AI. So I think it also applies to, for example, like object description. So the AI can be used to describe scenes, object, so that audio description can be made sort of machine trained. So that's one thing that will be one of the game changers in accessibility. But I do agree that's going to be a big change. Thank you.
Thank you, Masahito. I'm going to change the subject slightly. We've got a question from Pauline. I'm going to say this wrong. Luandanaska, and I will be corrected by Lydia. And this is directed at Lydia. Now, do you want to read this out, Judith? Have you found it? Can you see it?
Sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Okay, so she asked the question is,
Just
what-
read the whole paragraph.
okay. Her comment is that video conferencing platforms help in online meetings at school, work, social life. Some of them have automated captioning, but still they're not perfect. But the problem raises when a hard of hearing or deaf person is attending the meeting. Automated caption feature is not accessible in natural languages, or they are not good. Can Lydia say more? What are the steps taken to improve automated captions by platform providers? And how do you evaluate these activities in this direction? So after Lydia goes on, I'll ask Shadi to also come on, because a lot of these are also when he's talking about the AI and the platforms, and they directly answer that question. So Lydia.
Thank you very much to Paulina for asking this question. And because I am in UK, and I know that I am lucky to live in UK, and lucky that I am using English language proficiently, and I am able to get access to both automatic captioning as well as the professional captioners, such as the ones we are just following now. Therefore, I have much more opportunities as someone who is from Poland, and I am from Poland as well as Paulina. Polish language is not as developed in the automated captioning as, for example, English. English has always been, in a way, kind of much more moving forward. It has been much more developed. All the different work around was mostly around English language. And there are two ways of looking at it. For some people, automatic captioning is useful and usable, and especially if they've got some hearing to support themselves, they are happy. But there are some people who are completely deaf and they have absolutely no possibility of hearing anything. And then they really rely on accuracy, on making sure that they actually understand and they can fully participate in the meetings. So there are the two different things. However, in UK, I can ask for captioning from a professional captioner if I need such thing. Now, in Polish language and any other languages, yes, I have come across, for example, the situations when the captioner would translate through Google into Polish language, but actually Polish language is the structure of Polish language, for example, is not the same as English, so it doesn't come out in the same way as, for example, if Polish speaker is speaking and then, to actually understand. So there is a need to focus as well, not just on automatic captioning and further developing automatic captioning to make sure that it works for everyone, but also to develop the services, professional services, in similar way as we have in UK and USA with the captioners who are able to provide the services. Lastly, there is also a need to, I think it was evaluate. Yeah, the question was about evaluation of those activities. At the ITU, and Masahito will as well be able to confirm that, we are looking at developing the standards or the way of actually being able to measure how good, how accurate is captioning. At the moment, we only can go by the training which is provided for captioners and the way how they are being examined, and this is one of the ways. But we need something completely independent, so where organizers of the services are also get the confidence that when they are asked to provide the service, even be it automatic or non-automatic, they have a confidence that this will meet the needs of a person who is asking for it. Hopefully this is what you were looking for, Paulina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Andrea wants to say one thing before we go to talk about the standards issues that for Shadi, and the ability of trying to train more platforms to better use AI. For Andrea. You're muted.
Wait a minute. Okay, I'm back. The reason why I've asked to intervene is that we originally had this workshop on digital discrimination during COVID-19 pandemic. I want to have you guys focus a little bit on that when you answer questions and the ramifications and the detriment to the many different populations of, we have 2 billion people who have disabilities. So we want to make a point of trying to give a message out to people who are managing COVID-19 and helping everyone get through this. So that was my only point. So if we go back to the question for Shadi, please, would you like to repeat it?
Yes, thanks so much. I don't need to repeat it, but what I think we want Shadi to talk about is something that he talked about a little bit before, and how to get the engines better trained to find out different situations, and learn more, get more experience in learning the different languages so that they could do better on AI captions.
Yeah, thanks, Judith. So, and thank you, Andrea, for the reminder. I think COVID is a very important aspect of this. So, there's much debate whether AI will be a revolution or evolution. We're in the transitional period right now. Now, just to highlight, imagine that in every sentence there's a word that, and I'll just be silent, you're missing one word, okay? That's 90% accuracy. That means one word in a sentence of 10, every 10th word gets missed out. Now, in a normal situation, you are, I don't know, watching cat videos on social media. Maybe that's acceptable to have, some words missing and lower quality of service. But when you're talking about health hazards and risk and emergency situations, such as COVID, but there are many other emergency situations in terms of crisis where that is not acceptable. Even 95%, imagine, look at how many words we're just using now. And imagine, even if you go to 99%, every 100th word, it could be a really important word to understand the context and what is meant. So I completely concur with what Lydia is saying, and we should not forget there are lots of languages that have very little support for technology. Not all languages have the luxury like English does, or French or Spanish, or many of the other mainstream languages. There are many languages that really have very poor technology support. So in that case, the quality goes even further down. So my feeling is that it's important to promote these technologies and promote these tools. But I think, as Masahito was saying, maybe to support the captioners, maybe as a support tool to support the captioners and have the human combination still be in, so that it reduces the effort on captioners rather than trying to switch from one to the other straight away, because right now the quality is not far enough. But at the same time, if there's no demand, if there's no use of these technologies, then also the improvement or the gap will be more difficult to address. So there needs to be a bit of a combination, and we need to, I think of the context and think of the situations where it's acceptable to have certain levels of errors and where it's definitely not acceptable if we want to be inclusive. This, by the way, also applies to the question that Axel asked earlier about AI for image recognition and for screen reader. The same here. There will be some situations where maybe it's a help and maybe it can be along. When screen readers first started, their quality was actually fairly poor, but through the use, they could improve over time. So we have to start somewhere, but at the same time, we have to really understand that even small errors can have very big impact on people's lives.
I'm going to interrupt again, if I can, because you're talking about languages. we haven't mentioned at all sign language. And sign language is an extremely important language because every country has a different sign language. I'm asking Majaz, who is deaf, who's in the chat box, to maybe make some comments that we can read out that deal with sign language and the emergency situation regarding COVID-19. So I've given him a little project because there is enough time for him to do that. But one of the things that is happening in Japan, so I'm going to direct this to Masahito, and Masahito has been working in Japan with sign language, and I think we need to put some energy and some focus on the problems that sign language users have with regard to getting services and help, especially during COVID. Masahito, would you do that for me, please?
Yes. Which side, AI, sign language, or sign language interpretation, or sign language interpretation?
My question really deals with, we were talking about different languages, or Shadi was going in that direction. We haven't been talking about sign language discrimination during the time of COVID-19. So you've been working with this in Japan. So I wondered if you could just share with us what some of the problems are and what's not being recognized regarding sign language.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think one of the discriminations that we have to realize is that on the part of the people who help persons with disabilities, because they have a preset, assumed assumptions about how the deaf people would react, how the deaf people would think, things like that. And one of the things that comes from during this this assumption during the COVID-19 situation in Japan is that the sign language interpreters do not, in Japan, want to use video remote interpretation. They want to go help deaf people physically on the spot. The problem is, if they want to go to hospital and help deaf people, hospitals refuse them. They do not allow them to be on spot. So the deaf people have to be online and talk to the doctor online. But the sign language interpreters don't know how to get online. And there is no way they can do because they refuse to do so. So, and that is because sign language interpreters in Japan believe that face-to-face sign language interpretation is the way it should go. And they do not allow sign language interpreters to provide interpretation online. So that's sort of a discrimination, I think, from the point, from the part of sign language interpreters' side. So I think it's not just sign language interpreters, but many times I think on the part of people who are supposed to help persons with disabilities have certain preconditions or presumptions or assumptions about those people who need help. And they do not allow them to be included in the rest of the society, in a sense. And they have sort of a outdated concept of disability. And they think, those people with disabilities should be separated, should be different. And they have special needs. And those people who have been traditionally helping them are the only people who can help those persons with disabilities. This is this is what I learned, when I tried to introduce telephone relay service in Japan, as well as video remote interpretation in Japan. I'm still struggling. So that's kind of ironic, but it's actually true.
Thank you, Masahito. I'm going to ask Judith to read out what Majaz Dubravik, who I know personally, who is deaf, he has made some comments in direct relationship to what or shall I just do it since I've got him? It's for web, for TV and other audio visual media. Sign language needs to be, I know where he's going because we've been talking about this, and I've been working with him on a declaration between sign language interpreters and the World Federation of the Deaf. And there's not enough representation through TV and the web and other audio-visual situations regarding sign language interpretations, partially because there's a different sign language in every country. And also not all sign languages are trained in international sign, which is not a language, it's an adaptation. And Mateas agrees with you, Masahito, that there is a strong use to use VRI, video remote interpretation. Now, there's one person who hasn't been speaking, and I'm going to go after him now, and that's Christopher Lee. Would you like to interject a comment or two at this point, please?
Before Christopher does, one thing I think that we should state is that we need to have in those countries laws. We need to have laws that help, that regulators or other people say that guarantee a certain amount of sign language, guarantee certain rights, because without that, your companies are not going to do it. They say it's too expensive. This will work. So we need to have laws and regulations in effect, because without that, companies are not going to want to do it.
Thank you, Judith. I'm going to switch over to Christopher and remind everybody that I believe we actually have only 5 minutes left. Everybody's been really doing left. So Christopher, please make a comment, please, because you've been too quiet. It's not allowed.
So there's a lot of comments I want to make, so I'll put 2 of them in. I think regarding cognitive disabilities, when we talk about language, I think it's important to keep in mind that sometimes the most simple things you can do is just deal with like plain language when you're actually dealing with content. And just, as we write things up and do things, it can get complicated for people with cognitive disabilities. So I think plain language is an easy check if we focus on that. And then just circling back around to digital accessibility content, we've got some challenges still with publishers out there in regards to digital content. Publishers that are creating content that's not accessible. And I think it's something that we need to really be focused on. You can have all the platforms you want that are accessible, but if the content itself that is incorporated into the platforms is not accessible, we're in trouble. So some advocacy work in this particular area, some education, professional education and certification, which is one of the things that we're working on right now. IWP has pivoted recently with one of our certifications that we'll bring into the market this year, and actually really kicking it off next year, is an accessible document specialist, which is really needed out there. It's not just for academia or K-12, it's for just dealing with documents within organizations and so on. How do you create these accessible documents? And so I think AI can be a big part of that regarding definitely imagery. But we've got a long way to go in this area, and it's been going on a long time. And I think more advocacy needs to be put towards it. So those are my couple of words.
Thank you. Thank you. We actually have, in fact, supposedly run out of time if I look at my computer. Just want to ask the captioner, would she give us 5 minutes to wrap up, please? And she will answer me in the chat box because we're at the end. I think she'll be okay because Caption First, by the way, has done our captioning and they are fabulous. So, and also Luis has been doing all the help with the technical aspect from IGF, and he has been fabulous. He's kept us all online and has been helping us look at everybody. And yeah, we've got everybody, but I want to just take an opportunity to thank everyone. The conclusions are still yet to be made. And I think what I would like all of you to do is to, oh, wait a minute, somebody's just come in with a message. Mateas has said, regarding the use of sign language interpreters, we propose to use the interpreters for our own sign language who are interpreting the session under another web RTC session in parallel. Also, Okay, and Louis says thank you. Louis Bobo, who is our technical help, is thanking the panelists. And we're getting thank yous from different people who have been listening. I want you to know that we had over 30 people listening, which is great. And I thank all the people who tuned in to us. We have gotten some good information. There will be a report on all of this. The conclusion is, in my opinion, and this is all this is worth, is that we need to do more, especially now during COVID-19, to include persons with disabilities, in fact, in the messages that we sent out for radio, for TV, and all the government agencies that purport to help people during this particular critical time, which is very serious for everyone, but especially for those people who don't get direct communication. One final sentence from everybody, starting with Fernando, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, Fernando. Wait a minute, I can't get you unmuted. I can't get.
Can you hear me
You're
now?
okay, go. You're fine.
Okay, so my sentence is, no technology can substitute for human behavior. In other words, we need to have our priorities right. We need to cooperate to get things done. Technology is not going to do that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. Masahito, you're one sentence stretched as usual.
Yeah, I'd like to take up where Christopher left off, and also Shadi. I think it would be great to have sort of a standardized platform for education. And I think EPUB, DAISY, and W3C already have some kind of good platform. So maybe we can work together with your organization, ITU and W3C, to start sort of an initiative to provide accessible educational platform, online platform for standard-based platform for education. That's my last sentence and proposal. Thank you.
Shadi, since he mentioned you, would you like to go next, please, with your last comment?
Yeah, to respond to that, but also to the COVID situation in one sentence, Andrea, now more than ever. Yeah, we've been waiting long enough, and the pandemic should not be a reason to prolong the implementation of accessibility, but to actually accelerate it, because it's now needed more than ever.
Thank you. Christopher?
Yeah, you know, I want to say so much, but I'm gonna hold back. Leadership, mentoring. We've got brilliant minds out there in regards to accessibility in all areas that we've talked about today. We need to foster mentors and leaders in the area of disabilities, and we need to do it soon to help with acceleration, because some of these folks are moving on and retiring, and it's a scary time. So my one sentence would be, let's focus a little bit on leadership and mentoring also.
Thank you. Lydia, last but not least, you were first, and now you get the last comment.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I think everybody who's spoken just before me has put a lot of things perfectly in the right context. So all I want to say is this. COVID-19 has been a massive wake-up call for everyone. And let's use this opportunity to focus our energies and move things forward and work together, not just for technology, but the technology is all the answer to everything, but look at the combinations of the two. And I'm sure this way, the human factors, when they come into the technology, when they are being taken into considerations, we will definitely move forward. Thank you.
And guess what? I have Judith in here. I'm going to thank her and let her come on and read exactly what she's written about what you've just said, but that's all you get to do. We got to close down. Judith, go.
Yes, thanks so much for this excellent panel. If you want to hear more about these issues, Accessibility SIG is doing a webinar with Lydia on it, as well as Kristen Vogler and Mark Wheatley discussing about this issue. But I also want to say about Christopher Lee's point, people don't know how to make accessible PDFs. And they're images, and it's a real shame. And people need to be taught but I think it's also a standards issues in that scanners no longer have the option to save it as a document because of copyright issues. And that is a real shame.
Thank you, Judith. That's a very good point. I want to say thank you myself. It's been an excellent panel. I've enjoyed listening to everybody, and it's nice not to do so much talking. So from me to all of you, thank you very much. Thank you to the captioner. Thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you to Judith, who has been an excellent moderator. Thank you to Paulina, who's been watching as well, who is our remote moderator from Poland. And with that, I'm afraid we have to close, but let's hope we can do this panel again next year at IGF. Thank you very much. And Luis, thank you for helping me learn how to get on. I'm dyslexic and they had to train me to get on this because it was hard. So don't forget dyslexia. Whenever you make something for the web, make sure that those of us with reading and writing difficulties can get on too. Thank you. And so I will say,
Andrea.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea.
Oh,
Good
you're
job.
welcome. You're welcome. And I'm waving to everybody. Everybody's waving.
Mhm.
So listen, we'll meet again soon. I love all of you. I know all of you. And it's been a real pleasure to have you on this panel. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
all.
Thank you.
I don't want to leave. Oh, who's that?
Who?
Somebody. Andy Heath. Hello.
Yeah, it's me. Hello.
Oh.
I didn't get to speak, but I love what you're all doing. I'm happy to speak. Happy to do so next time. I've got a lot of stuff to put in.
You're on.
And guys, come on to the session now that the
I'll
captioning is done.
I'll be there on Thursday. Yeah.
Yes. And here Lydia, Mark, and Christian.
And Judith, thank you so much for your good work as being a really good moderator. You just did great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Okay, see you all. Bye.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.